I used to think loyalty was something that didn't have to be tested. That if you picked the right person, built the right kind of life together, you'd never have to wonder if they were in it for the right reasons. I used to believe a lot of things before the inheritance. My name's Jack. I'm a civil engineer by trade, a quiet guy who liked building things that lasted. Structures, foundations, bridges, things that hold up under pressure. I guess you could say I thought marriage worked the same way. Build it right, and it'd hold steady no matter what life threw at it. My wife, Claire, was sharp, book-smart, and quick-witted, with a style that always seemed a little too polished for small-town life. We met during grad school. She was studying law. I was knee-deep in structural dynamics. We weren't exactly a match on paper, but there was a spark, and I mistook it for something deeper. Our first few years of marriage were steady. She worked at a mid-sized law firm. I was in the field most days, managing sites, solving problems. We weren't rolling in money, but we were comfortable. Vacations once a year, dinners out on Fridays, the usual. But looking back now, I can see the cracks forming even then. See, Claire liked appearances. She liked being seen, liked the idea of success more than the grind of earning it. I didn't pay much attention to that at the time, figured it was harmless. Just different values, no big deal. But when my mom passed away, everything changed. My mother was a quiet woman, not one for show or attention. She lived modestly, despite having inherited a pretty substantial estate from her own father. Oil money, way back in the day. But you wouldn't have guessed it from the way she lived, same house she'd been in since the 80s, same car for nearly 2 decades. She never flaunted her wealth, and she didn't trust easily. She didn't trust Claire, either. Never said it out loud, but I could feel it in the way she'd ask quiet questions after dinners, or how she'd always insist on private conversations with me about family matters. I chalked it up to generational stuff, thought maybe she was just being protective. I didn't know until after she passed how right she'd been. When the will was read, I was stunned. Not because I inherited everything she'd told me that much years before, but because of the stipulations. My mom had seen through things I was too blind, or maybe too in love, to see. The bulk of the inheritance was placed in a trust. Not just any trust, a revocable living trust with provisions that kept it separate from marital assets. That meant Claire couldn't touch a cent of it unless I chose to share it. And here's the kicker. The trust came with a clause that required a full financial audit and spousal disclosure before any joint disbursement could be made. Mom had thought ahead. She knew people could change when money was involved. She didn't want me blindsided. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, reading that clause, feeling both humbled and oddly protected, like she was still looking out for me. Claire, though, her reaction was something else. At first, she acted supportive, said all the right things. Your mom was a brilliant woman, and I'm so proud of you, and we'll figure out what to do with it together. But I could see it in her eyes, the calculation. She started asking about renovations, trips, investment ideas. She wanted to quit her job and focus on creative pursuits, whatever that meant. But every time I brought up the trust and how it wasn't a free-for-all, the warmth drained from her voice. A few weeks later, I came home to a quiet kitchen and a manila envelope on the table. Divorce papers. No fight, no warning, no conversation. Just the cold slap of her decision, right there in legal print. I sat down and stared at the paperwork for a long time. My first reaction wasn't even anger, it was confusion. Why now? Why like this? And then I saw the timing. She'd filed just days after our attorney confirmed that the trust had finalized. The inheritance had officially passed into my name, protected, sealed, untouchable by anyone but me. That's when it hit me. She thought she'd get half. She thought she could wait it out, and when the money landed, she'd cash out of the marriage like it was a business venture. But my mother, God bless her, saw that play coming from a mile away. Now, you'd think I'd feel vindicated, right? Like justice had been served. But honestly, I felt sick. Not just because of the betrayal, but because I realized how long Claire must have been thinking this way. How long she'd stayed in a marriage she didn't believe in, just waiting for the payday. I didn't respond right away. Let her stew. Let her wonder. I took a walk around the neighborhood that night. Thought about my mom. Thought about all the times she tried to gently warn me and how I brushed her off. I thought about the wedding vows, the promises we made, and how they meant nothing to her in the end. And I thought about myself, what kind of man I wanted to be now that this chapter was ending. When I finally did call Claire, I kept it simple. I got your papers, I said. There was a pause on the line. I imagined her rehearsing lines, expecting a fight. Jack, I just think this is for the best, she started. We've grown apart, and don't. I cut her off. Don't pretend this is about anything but money. She didn't deny it. Not really. Just gave some half-hearted explanation about fairness and entitlement. I let her finish, then said, "You're not getting the trust money. It's separate, legally and ethically." Another pause. Then her voice sharpened. "You can't hide everything. We've been married for years. I'll get something." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I just said, "Good luck with that. My mother didn't just leave me a fortune. She left me a fortress. And you're not getting through the gate." She hung up. Just like that. That night, I stood by the window in the living room, the one that looked out onto the street. It was the first time in years I felt alone, but not in a bad way. It was a quiet sort of alone. Cleansing. Like I could finally hear my own thoughts again. Claire thought she'd outsmart the system, but it was my mother who outsmarted her. And me? I was finally waking up. The thing about people like Claire is that they don't go quietly. She didn't just sign the divorce papers and move on. No, she tried every angle, sent her lawyer after mine, dug into every financial record, even tried to argue that the inheritance counted as anticipated marital property, which wasn't even a thing in our state. But she didn't realize who she was up against. See, my mom hadn't just set up a trust, she'd hired a bulldog of an estate attorney. The kind of guy who could find a loophole in a locked door. Every single provision had been airtight, every clause reviewed and revised for maximum protection. My name was the only one on the trust, and because it had never been commingled with our joint assets, not once, Claire didn't have a legal leg to stand on. Still, that didn't stop her from trying. I'd get these polite but pointed emails from her lawyer, dancing around phrases like equitable relief and spousal contribution. The subtext was clear. They wanted to wear me down, force me to offer a settlement just to end the headache. But I wasn't playing that game. Not anymore. It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. Because when someone shows you who they really are, you don't negotiate with that. You walk away. Eventually, Claire's legal team must have realized the wall wasn't going to budge. That's when the emails started sounding softer. She wanted to talk. Not through lawyers. Just the two of us. I agreed to meet, but not because I wanted reconciliation. I just needed to see her face one more time to make sure I wasn't imagining all of this. To make sure the person I loved really was gone. We met at a little coffee shop downtown, one we used to go to back when things were still good. She walked in dressed to the nines, tailored coat, designer bag, makeup done just right. Always calculated. Even now. She sat down, offered a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Jack," she said like it was a greeting and a question all at once. I didn't bother with small talk. "What do you want?" I asked. She sighed. "I didn't expect things to go like this." "Yeah," I said. "What did you expect, Claire?" Her eyes dropped for just a second. "I don't know. I thought we'd at least talk about a fair division. I put years into this marriage, Jack." "No," I said quietly. "You put years into the idea of a payoff. You were waiting for the moment my mom died so you could cash in. But she saw through you. She protected me from the storm you were planning. That got under her skin. I could see it in the way her jaw tensed. I was your wife," she said, voice rising. "I supported you. You tolerated me," I replied, "right up until I became valuable. That's not love. That's investment management." She didn't have a comeback for that. Eventually, she stood up, tossed her coffee in the trash untouched, and said, "You'll regret this one day." I just nodded. Maybe. But at least I'll regret it alone, and not while lying next to someone who was counting down the days until I became worth leaving. That was the last time I saw her. The divorce finalized quietly a few weeks later. No courtroom drama. No final pleas. Just a stack of paperwork and a signature. She walked away with her own assets, what little she'd saved. The house had always been in my name. The trust was untouchable. She moved out, left a few things behind. I boxed them up and dropped them off at her firm. No note. The silence afterward was almost disorienting. You don't realize how much space someone takes up in your head until they're gone. Even the arguments, the subtle manipulations, the passive-aggressive jabs, they all leave echoes. But as the weeks rolled on, those echoes faded. I started cooking for myself again. Not just eating, but cooking. Real meals. I fixed the squeaky cabinet door she always complained about but never touched. I read every night before bed. For the first time in years, I remembered what peace felt like. And that trust my mother left? I didn't touch it. Not a dime. I went back to work, kept my routine. Because I realized something important during all of this. The fortune wasn't a gift. The real gift was freedom. The gift was knowing, beyond any shadow of doubt, that I didn't need to be loved conditionally, that my worth wasn't tied to a bank account, that I didn't have to compromise my peace to keep someone else's illusion alive. Claire thought she'd outsmarted me, but it was my mother who saw the truth before I ever could. And now, every time I look in the mirror, I see a man who finally understands the value of what she left behind, not just the money, but the wisdom. That fortune didn't save me. It revealed her. And in the process, it gave me back myself.